Hey, it's PC Gamer Show. This week we're talking Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord and the Resident Evil 3 remake. No spoilers, don't sweat it. Stick around. Hey everybody, welcome to the PC Gamer Show for what is today? April 1st, 2020. Not funny.
Yeah, I was like,
funny.
what's an April Fool's joke?
That's the rhyme there. 2020, not funny.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful day. Everyone is really happy. April Fools.
If only.
Global pandemic and we're all miserable.
We're all trying. So hopefully we can be a light
Yeah.
in the darkness. We're not going to sit here and muse on tough times, but we hope you're all doing well, feeling well, and getting those games in where you can.
Staying safe. Yeah. Games.
Take advantage and play a lot of games with us. I'm James Davenport. I'm a features producer at PCGamer.com. With me is Stephen Messner, and you're a senior reporter at PCGamer.com.
Yeah. Hello. Hi.
Right on. Not only are you a senior reporter, but you're sort of a senior Mountain Blade correspondent, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. I've spent many years in the virtual battlefields of Calradia, reporting on the frontier.
It's a big fucking frontier, man. So I finished. Some context. This is going to be a kind of a freewheeling conversation about Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord, which hit Steam Early Access on March 31st. Was there a 31st in there? 30th? One of those. A day early, and it's a big fucking deal in PC gaming. It turns out this series.
It's the biggest launch on Steam so far, like by a margin, a wide margin. It is. There was like 150,000 people concurrently playing it
on launch day. I checked the peak, I think, earlier today, and it broke 200,000.
Oh my god!
Yeah, this is a very, very big launch. I mean, to compare, I think like a legacy game, like it's got decades of fans and momentum behind it. Doom Eternal, I think, peaked on Steam at, and again, Doom Eternal's multi-platform release, but on PC it peaked around like 150 or I don't know, 100 or something like that. And here we have like Mountain Blade just skyrocketing. And so it's a small studio, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
Putting out wild medieval battle simulators. And like I've never played this series. It's surprising me because like I consider myself like a big time PC gamer, and I've never really spent time with this series, but it's kind of always been in my periphery, and I over the last like decade or two, I've seen these games kind of like in Steam sales and had some friends in some circles kind of like mention them. But I haven't really felt the full weight of the fan base until now, because it's been like 7 years since the last game. Those games have been kind of circulating and gathering momentum on their own. And now we have like this wild. Well, explain to me what the fuck this game is, first of all.
I don't even know. Like
it's a lot.
It is a medieval like role-playing sim. Like, it's not a role-playing game in the sense that like you would think of The Witcher 3 as a role-playing game. It is a sandbox simulator set in a fictional medieval kingdom where you basically like role-play nobility interacting with all these other noble families. But you can kind of do anything in the game where so you can become like a warlord, and you can forge your own kingdom if you want to. You can join another kingdom and fight for them. You can become like a merchant trader where you have a big caravan and you are ferrying goods across this dynamic economy that like resources will be in surplus or in demand depending on sort of wars that are happening or famine, like all these events. So it's sort of like this deeply simulated medieval life game, and it's weird because it's like you're playing it's like technically a third or a first person game. So you make a character, you were playing as that character, and then you were sort of heading out into the world to make your legacy, whether that you become like an arena champion fighting in tournaments, or a mercenary, or you become a bandit and you're just robbing everybody. You have a lot of freedom, and that's what people like. Is like it's a game where you can kind of live out any sort of medieval fantasy. You can get married and have kids. Like it's a big game.
Yeah, it's kind of overwhelming,
Yes.
that first hit. So I just finished the single player tutorial, which expanded the scope of the game rapidly. Again, this is early access, so none of this is necessarily the intended onboarding experience
It's
or
very
the
bad.
final vision. It's very bad. This is a classic PC game in that it is incredibly janky. It's got that endearing jank with
Yes.
kind of some stiff animations and like funky fonts and UI. Uh, that looks like it was kind of thrown together in Paint, in MS Paint in some regards. But it all works towards, like you said, this really ambitious um, uh, RPG sim is what sandbox is kind of what you're saying, and
Yeah.
it's easy to kind of forgive a lot of that stuff for the for some of this, the anecdotes that come out of this game or possible anecdotes that come
Yeah.
out of this game.
Like you said, it's like it's an indie game, but it's this enormously deep and large indie game. And so you kind of make these trade-offs. So if you're like the type of person where
Yeah.
you're like, oh, graphics are nice, but that's not what makes me love a game. If you're someone that likes, say, RimWorld, or you've always been fascinated by the idea, whether or not you've gotten into it yourself, of like Dwarf Fortress,
Hmm.
it kind of sits in that territory. Obviously not as complicated as Dwarf Fortress, nothing is. But real life isn't even as complicated as Dwarf
No.
Fortress is. But anyway, it's that kind of depth of game where the trade-off that you're making is that it is janky and it looks weird, and there's like, I don't know, it's kind of endearing though in a way.
Yeah, my
But yeah,
favorite.
the onboarding terrible, or the onboarding process is terrible. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
No, it's really funny. Like it's such a charming intro and a lovely like contrast. There's this really in depth character creator, and you can change like eyebrow depth and shape and
Yeah.
everything like cheekbone. And it's got everything, and it kind of you've got this preview of the character model next to it, and it's pretty detailed. It's pretty good looking. It's like, wow, this is a lovely realistic kind of like RPG character creator. And then you pop into the game, and like the first NPCs looks like a Muppet or like some kind of taxidermied human with buck teeth.
It's like
stupidly.
Oblivion characters all
Yeah.
over again. Like when you think of like the ugliest characters in PC gaming, they all belong in Oblivion, the Elder
Yeah.
Scrolls 4 Oblivion. It's that. Yeah, they're so, because it just randomly rolls. I think yeah, when you start a new campaign, like one thing that I want to impress on people is like every campaign is sort of different. Like
didn't know
kingdoms will have personalities, and characters sort of have personalities that govern their behavior. But that, I think, all kind of gets shuffled around every single time you start over.
Mhm.
And so you might have a game where one kingdom, rises up and takes over all the other kingdoms and becomes sort of a new empire. And then another game where it's sort of a completely different events unfold. And likewise, like the characters themselves that you're interacting with are all randomly generated. So you go to like a
Oh.
village, and the village elder is somebody new. I think they have a different appearance. I'm pretty sure. This is the hard thing about Mountain Blade Bannerlord, is it's so big and so different from even like the original ones. But I'm fairly positive characters are randomly generated.
Gotcha. Well,
I think.
either way, the scope of what's there and like how it is expressed
Yeah.
is enough to, like, even if it was all bespoke and cut to form, then I think there's still this like kind of unending medieval sim in there, like you said, with that can articulate in so many different ways. I mean, like let's talk about how it's expressed. So there's kind of like different layers to, at least we're talking about the single player.
Yeah.
Different layers to how you move through this world and how battles take place. And can you kind of explain like maybe the those different layers and kind of the flow between them?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because you're not like I was saying earlier. It's like, oh, it's a third person role-playing game, but it's not really. So you sort of
Mhm.
have like a campaign overworld map, and that's like where your party is represented as like a little man on a horse, and you ride around to different villages, and you can see other parties that are moving around you. So if like an army is moving out, you'll see a bunch of lords on their horses in like a little formation as they go marching off to battle, and you'll see like looters and stuff like that running around on the overworld map. And then once you actually get to a sort of a location, whether
Mhm.
that's like a battle that you're about to take place in, or you get to a village, you kind of have a few different options, but all of that is like a physical space that you can then walk around in as
Right.
your character. And so what's so nice about this one is they've added some really nice quality of life features. In the earlier games, you would go to a town and you would have to like physically run around the town to find the individual characters that you wanted to talk to. And that got really tedious, because the towns were often quite maze-like,
Mhm.
and if you're looking for a specific character and you don't know where they are, that's just really annoying having to constantly run around looking for them, especially in such like a world that is as big as this.
Mhm.
Now they've added some stuff where like you can see characters by pressing like the alt key, they show up, but then there's also the option where from the menu screen you can just go talk to them directly. So you like click on their portrait,
Gotcha.
and you're like, I want to talk to the Lord of the Castle, and it'll just take you straight to the Lord of the Castle right in front of him, just spawn you in, and then you can talk to him. And then if you want, you can kind of wander around. But that does that kind of answer your question? Like that's sort of like the two layers
Right.
of how you move through the world.
Yeah, like, I
Um,
guess when I booted it up and had heard, just through hearsay what this game is, I was expecting, like, a big open world a la, a Bethesda RPG, but no, it's really more of
right.
a, like, the one layer, it reminded me a lot of, like, a Total War map or something like that,
Yep.
where you can pause and let time pass and kind of see how this massive systemic, world and all these societies and different factions are kind of interacting on their own. You can kind of like let it go, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
and it's still like running a big, an entire country, continent, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um,
Continent. Yeah,
uh,
like so you can't like physically walk your character
yeah.
from one city to the next. And also that would be impossible. That would take like if they did add that, it would be like in Elite Dangerous if someone were to fly from one sun to the other. Not quite as bad, but like it would take a long time because the game is quite realistic in its sort of portrayal. So like you have to manage your party's food. So you have to have food stores as you're traveling around. It can take a day or two to go from one castle to the other, or one town to the other. And so the game world is almost too big for that kind of. It
Right.
needs to be sort of abstracted out. But yes, you can honestly just start the game, hit pause, not hit pause, but like just wait in the spot and let time pass, and you will just see all around you as merchant caravans go back and forth from
Hmm.
cities. And maybe the characters themselves aren't randomly generated now that I'm thinking about it, but like that kind of behavior is all procedural.
Gotcha.
So you'll see like, yeah, merchants who have an abundance of iron will want to offload it to locations that have less iron for money. And villagers, once they've farmed up like, I don't know, like wheat, they will, like a little villager party will leave a village and go to the city where they can sell that wheat at a market. And then they'll take the proceeds back to the village. And that is all simulated. So you
Wild.
can waylay those villagers and steal their wheat
Hmm.
and sell it at the market for a profit, or you can catch them on the way back and steal their gold. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, it's a very deep game. What people love about it is the anecdotes, and like it's an interesting game because you won't have like these crazy anecdotes like any kind of game that sort of has this level of simulation. Um, there's sort of a detachment from the storytelling that can kind of happen because
Hmm.
all the characters are sort of this procedural generated character. There's not necessarily, at least at this point in the game in early access 2, there's a lack of it. They're talking about adding sort of handwritten characters with
Right.
backstories and stuff like that. But right now, you'll meet these characters and they sort of, it's not going to be like meeting a character in The Witcher 3 where they have this sprawling backstory that you
Hmm.
get to sort of unravel and participate in. But you get to have these fun little anecdotes where like you can make enemies and then you can defeat them in battle and then their friends will all like you and then you become a lord in their kingdom because you won favor with them by destroying their enemies. Like those kinds of things. You can get married. People can like, I think they can like lie to you and stuff like that and give you false information if they want to. There's a lot going on in the game. And
Yeah.
I think that's what people like is that freedom to just do anything and sort of become anyone.
And it's pretty wild. I'm kind of wondering, like, how do you personally tend to play Mountain Blade?
Yeah, so I have in the original game, so like Warband, Mountain Blade Warband was sort of the big one that everybody loved. That was the sequel to the first one.
Yeah.
And then Bannerlord is like a more refined Warband. It's like they took everything that people liked about Warband and they made it better. And then they're hoping to fix sort of everything people didn't like about Warband. And Warband was the one that I probably have like 300 hours in. And I've kind of done a little bit of everything. In my first playthrough with this game, I am playing a character. Her name is Arya, and she's part of sort of like the Gaelic tribe. Her parents, I think, were bards. And when you're doing your character creation process, you like choose your whole family backstory, like you put together, and that influences your skills. So if your parents were bards, you'll have like a bonus to being like a rogue, and you'll have extra charm because bards are rogues and charming. And so she's like that. And right now, I haven't really decided. I'm kind of doing sort of the generalist everyman approach where I'm like, killing bandits and trying to make money. I've fought in a few tournaments just to win some initial gold, but I'm not exactly sure. I think like I want to just do like I think whenever someone plays the game, probably like their first goal, because it's the most easiest one to visualize, is just making your own kingdom or becoming sort of a wealthy nobleman where you have your own castle and you have your own armies. It's also worth mentioning that like once you get a city, there's like a whole other game where you're talking about what buildings to buy and managing taxation of your serfs, and then defending it. And if you're not defending it, then they're not happy, and then they might rebel against you. Like it's it's a big game. It's such a big game. It's also worth mentioning too that then there's like a combat system. Like have you fought, right? Like you've
Yeah, so I did very small scale, like early, like 6-on-6 combat.
Right.
But a big selling point of Mountain Blade is the ridiculous scale of these.
Yes. And that Mountain Blade, if I'm not mistaken, was the game that sort of, I think, pioneered the medieval combat systems we see in a lot of games. So if you've played Chivalry, if you've played like War of the Roses, Mordhau is the most recent example of it. All of those games would have a combat system where like you use the mouse to determine your direction of attack. So if you like flick your mouse to the left, you'll do sort of a left hand or like a leftward strike. You can do like a downward chop, and that's all handled by the mouse. Mountain Blade was the game that sort of pioneered that style, and it's very challenging, very nuanced combat where you can, because like if you have a sword and you're wanting to block, you also have to match the opponent's directional attack. So if they're swinging from the left, you need to block from the left in order to not receive damage, or block from the top, I guess. And so it's very overwhelming, but then it does that and it drops it into battles where you can have like I think I set the maximum on mine, and I haven't filled it out yet, so I don't know if my computer can actually run it, but I put it at 700. 700 seemed like a safe number of units to have on screen at once. And so you can have these huge medieval battles, castle sieges, where all of the characters are basically playing out this combat system that's sort of very nuanced and skill based. And so that's the thing that I love the most about this game. I think of the 200 or however many hundreds of hours I've sunk into Mountain Blade as a series, almost all of that has been multiplayer.
Right, and so you can just hop directly into these big siege battles, kind of?
Yes, I've been trying to do it since launch. And what the funny thing about this early access release is it's really hard to understand what the game is. It's something that Tale Worlds needs to improve on, because they've talked for so long about what they want Bannerlord to be. But the early access version obviously isn't finished, and I'm finding it really hard to figure out what is actually in the early access version and what's still to come. Gotcha. So I've gone into the multiplayer and I've managed to join like custom servers, and it's just been team deathmatch, but I haven't been able to do any of the castle sieges, which is what I always loved from the original game. There was all these community servers that were just siege modes. And so you would play a castle siege, if you think about it, like chopping down doors, breaking in, storming the walls. And then if you can kind of capture a central control point, then you win. And that's where it's like the most fun, playing against other characters, and the skill level there can get really high. And there's an element of Counter-Strike to it where you're buying your gear with gold that you earn from how well you're doing. so if you're doing really well, you can then, if you die, you get to respawn and you can pick like the longest, biggest battle axe that you can
Oh
just
yeah.
swing around and just butcher, everybody in a in a 5 meter radius. But yeah, so that's kind of like Mountain Blade in a nutshell. It is a very weird game. I'm surprised to see it. I'm not surprised to see it so popular,
Yeah.
but I wonder if it'll last because I do think that it is sort of a niche kind of.
I think that niche or like the base audience will be assuming they're liking what they're playing, and there's enough there, will be loyal as hell, at least based on
Yeah,
the
definitely.
last 7 years of rhetoric about the game that kind of seep through the cracks of every comment section and message board and so on.
Right.
It's this is a hardcore fan base. I'm personally most excited about the eventual mod scene because that's kind of sort of another, I think, like
Yes.
pillar of the series. Most of what I have, most of what I've seen and enjoyed the most about Mountain Blade, as someone who's like again like pretty distant from the series, um, is like the ridiculous total conversions and historical mods. Can you talk about some of that, some of like maybe the more iconic ones or ones you were
Oh
into,
yeah.
and kind of what you hope to see happen in Bannerlord?
Yeah, so one of like the best mods for Warband was like the Florist mod pack. I believe it was called Florist something or other. And that was like a total conversion mod that just took the base game and then made it that much more deeper and more realistic in some ways, much harder in other ways too. Like it's already a very challenging game. It's worth noting like part of what's fun about Bannerlord or Mountain Blade in general is like it also is a game that does a really good job of making you go through peaks and valleys. So the game is quite difficult. It is not expected that you will just sort of become a king on your first try.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if you're depending on what difficulty you have the combat set to and stuff like that, like you will just straight up get your ass kicked again and again and again. Or you maybe get like a few soldiers together and you'll have like a little party of 20 people, and then you'll run into a band of forest bandits
Mm-hmm.
who just murder everybody, take all your gold, take you prisoner, ferry you around the countryside, and then ransom you off for money and leave you basically like destitute. And then you just start over. And that's sort of the fun, is these stories that you can kind of have as your character goes through these wild adventures. But anyway, what was I talking about? I was talking about the mods. I'm so sorry. Florist mod pack. So that really just expanded sort of the scope of the base game. I'm really excited to see. I'm sure those guys and gals behind Florist are working on a Bannerlord version of that. But then there was like the obvious stuff. Like, of course, there was a Game of Thrones mod pack. How could a game like this not, that is so tied around these battling nations and their sort of ruling families, how like that loans itself so naturally to Game of Thrones. And so that, of course, is there. My personal favorite, which was such a weird left field one for Mountain Blade Warband, and I hope it sort of gets a new life in Bannerlord, is the Napoleonic Wars total conversion mod, which doesn't really have a single player component, but in multiplayer, it was Napoleonic warfare. So if you, or like civil era, like the Civil War era warfare,
Right.
which is, soldiers stand in big long lines with long inaccurate guns
yeah.
and then take turns shooting one another. Now, what was crazy about this scene, the Napoleonic Wars scene in Warband, and why I hope to God it comes to life again in Bannerlord, is that people played that out in multiplayer servers, but would adhere to that, what's the word I'm looking for? Like etiquette of battle.
Yeah.
So I would play this game and I would be like a part of a line where there would be like 8 or 12 of us marching in formation with our guns, and there would be a guy next to us like playing a snare drum and another guy like playing on a fiddle, and we would like march towards this other squad of guys, and we would get close and take turns shooting one another while a general like gave us commands to like reload or like yeah, I don't know. I've played with like hardcore guilds that did this, and it was very fun. It was like one of the best
amazing.
multiplayer experiences. So it's a very open-ended game that can kind of create all sorts of wild mods. But I think like the big ones that people gravitate towards are the Game of Thrones ones.
Yeah.
And I think there was like a Lord of the Rings one, and then sort of this Florist complete overhaul was the big one that just adds a lot more depth to an already deep game.
Yeah, and I guess we're already seeing or will see some mods trickle out for Bannerlord. So
Yeah.
I think that'll be something that kind of keeps this series afloat for a long time. Even though this is an early access release, it is complete enough for the modders to take hold of and do some pretty cool things with.
Yeah, it is like in playing it, and albeit I haven't spent 40 hours building a kingdom and seeing
Mhm.
how it adds up, but like so far, at the very least, it feels about as feature complete as Warband
Gotcha.
did, like the previous game. And I think from there they'll add sort of more depth and more variety as we go. But so far, like yeah, it's been really fun to play. I think like anyone that likes RPGs or sim games, or if you have played any of the Total War games or Crusader Kings 2, like this is a game that you should definitely be checking out. I think I would warn people that it's like, I keep going back to The Witcher 3, but it's not like The Witcher 3 where you have
Mhm.
this like story to be told and these characters that have really defined personalities and quests and stuff like that. It's all a lot more because it's all sort of procedurally generated. It's a lot more detached, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you
There's
kind of
not.
got to bring some imagination to it,
Yes.
from what I can tell.
Yeah. To have fun with it, you definitely have to sort of be willing to write your own headcanon as you're playing.
Mhm.
The game will not sort of step in. A lot of the characters, like the dialogue, for example, is often very basic. Characters sort of have a set amount of dialogue, and a lot of the dialogue is shared between characters because it's more functional than it is for you know what I mean? Like you can go up to
True
any
flavor,
lord and
yeah.
be like, yeah, it's more functional than flavor. Like most any lord you can go up to and be like, hey, how's it going? And they'll be like, well, good. I fought a battle recently. And it almost feels a bit robotic and stilted, but it's part of sort of the downside, I think, to this style of simulation. But there's nothing else like it.
Yeah, as long as you know that. Big caveat, but I don't even call it caveat, just an FYI.
Yeah.
Right on. We're going to be playing the hell out of this for, well, the foreseeable future. So stick around on PC Gamer. If you're like intimidated by kind of the scope of this game, Steven and Fraser and Harry and everyone are writing a ton of guides about kind of how to get into the series. And would you say it's not as maybe intimidating as it presents? Or is it?
No,
Yeah.
it's quite accessible. You can play the game on very easy, where like even if you're terrible at the combat, like it reduces all incoming damage by like 2/3. So there's a bunch of difficulty options that you can really play with to make the game very easy as you're learning the ropes. It feels a bit intimidating, but it's really like I think you read a guide or two at most, and then you start to just learn things yourself, and then it's just experimenting and seeing what you can do and what you can get away with and
Cool.
putting it all together. So yeah, I don't think it's certainly not Crusader Kings 2 or any of like the infamous, daunting simulation games out there. It's not on that level by any means.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah.
Mountain Blade 2, Bannerlord. I'm excited to get in there and finally crack this series and figure it out. Yeah, thanks, Steven. Thanks for breaking it down, letting us know how it's going for you. We'll be checking in with you and your weird role-playing adventures in the future, I'm sure. I'm so disappointed that this little someone found like a secret menu option on launch day that let you play as a baby, like a toddler, for a day at least in game time, which was very, very funny. Unfortunately, I think did they patch it out? Or
that makes me think that it was actually a glitch. Like at first it felt like an Easter egg, but the fact that they removed it makes me think that it was just a weird glitch that you could play as a baby for a day. Once an in-game day passed, you would turn into an adult. But they should bring that back.
If not, modders will do it. Make it happen, modders.
Yeah.
Let's have some baby wars. Cool. All right.
Like 700 babies on screen just murdering one another. That is a mod that I would like to see. Yes, do it.
I'm into it. Thanks again, Steven. We'll let you get back to it and see you on the other side. Hey everybody, James again, and I'm here with Emma Matthews, PCGamer.com's guides writer, one of our guides writers. And you just tore through this game, huh? Resident Evil 3, the Resident Evil 3 remake.
Yeah, I played it over the weekend, so just 2 sessions basically over a Saturday and Sunday, and yeah, I liked it.
Right on. Yeah, and so that's kind of why I brought you on, is you can go read Andy Kelly's review. It's not the most favorable review, and I think it's interesting to get a different kind of perspective on this game in particular, because it's been pretty divisive overall. The early reviews, and now that the game is out today, on April 3rd, I think you're seeing a lot of people kind of tip one way or the other, pretty heavily and pretty hard. And I think that's kind of gonna be the focus of our conversation about Resident Evil 3 Remake. We're not gonna get into spoilers. We're gonna talk kind of vaguely about the things that are, in the marketing and you've probably seen in trailers and some of the locations, but we're not gonna get into anything that hasn't been revealed already. So don't sweat it. Don't sweat it. Don't worry about getting the entire plot spoiled or kind of unexpected changes from the original. But I kind of want to open up first, Emma. Do you have what is your relationship with Resident Evil overall, and what is your relationship with Resident Evil 3, the original game, if you have any?
Okay. So with Resident Evil 3, I haven't played the original game.
Mhm.
So this was like my first time playing Resident Evil 3 with the remake. But with regards to the whole series, I've played Resident Evil 2 Remake, Resident Evil 5, and Resident Evil 7 as well.
So you didn't play 4? No
I
4
did
in
not
there.
play 4.
Interesting.
It's still in my backlog. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I guess, okay. So what is your overall feeling about this game then? We'll get into the details. Just to lay the foundation here. Not a huge relationship with the series past, not a huge no relationship with the original Resident Evil 3, but you feel what about the remake?
I like it. Honestly, I like that it's short, which I know some people aren't as much of a fan of. I enjoyed my time with it, despite having to sort of blast through it quite quickly to write guides on it. I really like the fact that it's more linear than the Resident Evil 2 remake, I would say. There's less time to get lost, which I really appreciate, because there were times in the Resi 2 remake where I would just be kind of aimlessly wandering around, vaguely knowing what I should be doing, but
Mhm.
not quite finding where I'm supposed to be. And I think sometimes I would kind of just lose interest at those points. There's not really as much room for that to happen in this game. It's kind of, you go in, you do the stuff, you see the story, and then you're out again. And I quite like that.
Interesting. So I don't I've only played the first maybe hour just last night, and I don't think I disagree with you yet. And I'm like a mid-tier Resident Evil guy, you might say. So my relationship with the series is I played the first game on the Nintendo DS. There was some kind of, I don't know, remaster. I liked it a lot. Nintendo DS, remember that thing? God, I'm old. And never played 2, never played 3. They just weren't available to me. I never had a PlayStation. I didn't play games until I was late into my teens. I wasn't allowed. So I kind of missed out on all of that hard coded Resident Evil nostalgia that a lot of people tend to have. And my first real love in the series was Resident Evil 4, and it kind of endeared me to it marked the shift in the series, I think, from that, the slow survival horror, and put one foot in the kind of action oriented direction the series took with 5 and 6, maybe to dangerous excess, and kind of reared or pulled back in 7. But I liked those games anyway. Well, 6 no, 6 no, but 5, it kind of disappointed me. But 4 is like that's what I think of when I think of Resident Evil. A nice mix of tension, with great atmosphere, and the occasional big action scene. But the real, I think the real power of that game in particular is just the sense of being overwhelmed. And so that's kind of what I think about. And so when I come to Resident Evil 3, I should say I also love the Resident Evil 2 remake, and I did like the kind of maze-like nature of it. I think in particular because I like adventure games where I just kind of click around and do stupid, arbitrary item swapping puzzles and such. I like that stuff. I like kind of unpicking a space, but I'm not. I also, I'm not. I'm not against. Again, I'm not against like more linear play. And I kind of I admired Mr. X in that game for what that kind of like constant, unknowable, dynamic threat. But I also was extremely exhausted by Mr. X. And so going into Resident Evil 3, no attachment to the original, I'm feeling kind of relieved that and endeared to its like immediate like hardcore action. It's just like opens up with explosions and Nemesis is there and immediately kicking your ass and you're running away from him. And the city bit is like it's not as disorienting or confusing as the police station in RE2 remake. And I'm kind of liking the pace of it overall. It's breezy and fun, and I'm not mad that Nemesis, especially, and maybe we can talk about Nemesis now, isn't this this dynamic like kind of ongoing threat. He's kind of relegated to specific scenes and moments because Nemesis, and tell me if you agree or disagree or how you feel about this bastard, is like too much. It would be way too much if Nemesis was just kind of like always there, always on your ass. Because this guy can like tentacle you, he can leap in front of you, he can sprint after you. He's relentless when he enters the scene.
Yeah, for sure. Like I really enjoyed the Resident Evil 2 remake, and it was interesting to have like Mr. X kind of always on your tail.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree. Nemesis is an extreme dude, and you do not want him around all the time. It is nice to know that like sometimes you can just kind of explore and do what you want to do. And then, I mean, for the most part, you can feel when he's going to turn up.
Yeah.
Like he's been away for a bit and you're like, okay, he's probably going to appear soon. But yeah, I don't think I would have wanted him just around all the time. I think that would have been too exhausting, and I probably would have played in like maybe 4 play sessions rather than like say 2.
Yeah.
Just because I'd need a rest.
I feel you. Like even after his first appearance, which I kind of his first appearance after the intro, which is really short and not that difficult to get through. I was just kind of like breathless because it's extreme. I think the presence of Nemesis is way more intimidating. Mr. X is like the stompy guy you can kind of hear in the distance, and it's like this lurking threat, but he's slow and a bit more subdued in his appearance. He's just kind of like a guy in a hat, big stone.
Yeah, he's fancy, but yeah, I know what you mean.
And meanwhile, Nemesis is like at least like 2 feet taller, big, broad shoulders, and screaming the whole time, running around. It's a lot. But I'm kind of curious why you think, I don't know, where do you think the split comes from? Because you said you like this game overall. Some people are very upset with maybe how it treats the original game, but do you feel like this short length is lacking in any way? What I guess maybe let's just talk about the length overall. Do you feel like it's a lesser game, or it's missing anything, or it feels too abrupt, or is it like a perfect chewable length for what it is?
I think there were some sections where I'm not going to mention it just to avoid spoilers, but there were sections where I thought I'd be there for a bit longer than I actually was.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like, oh, I'm in this area. I've sort of found everything I need to find, and now I'm being pushed on to the next thing. I
Mm-hmm.
felt like that a couple times throughout, probably like halfway through, I would say. Um, I like the length because it's nice to have a game that you can finish like in a couple of sessions over a weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sort of struggling right now to try and get through Half-Life Alyx in the evenings, and with other games sort of releasing around the same time, that's been really tricky to get through.
Yeah.
And that's only like 15 hours, and I'm kind of like I'm probably on like hour 6 or 7.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I really appreciate the length of this one. I did like the Resi 2 remake, which was like obviously quite a bit longer. Um I wouldn't say it's necessarily lacking. I do understand why people like where people are coming from when they say that. Um but I quite enjoyed the fact that it was so sort of streamlined overall. I like the fact that there was no time for filler. It was
Mm-hmm.
just like, we're going to focus on the story. We're going to get you to do these things, and then that's it. And I think usually with these kind of games, I sort of play them, and then once I've finished it, that's it. I don't really tend to go back.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with this one, actually, with the Resi 3 remake, I'm probably going to go back this weekend and play on like a harder difficulty.
Nice.
Just because I think like, and that's saying something. As someone who really doesn't like replaying the same stuff over and over again, like I like it enough to go back and have another go.
Feels doable. And I'm the same. Like there's a couple games I can think of in my life that I have like kind of immediately or relatively soon started over again because I think because I just liked the experience. It was breezy and kind of you get into that flow state pretty quickly. And I think Resident Evil 3 so far seems to just kind of be like extremely well paced, to such a degree that I think it's a huge contrast in tone to Resident Evil 2. And I think that's intentional, and I think bringing I get why people bring the expectations from the slower pace of Resident Evil 2, the remake, and the older games to Resident Evil 3 remake, but this feels like an intentional choice. It doesn't feel like this game was made into a streamlined action game with horror elements because the development studio didn't have time or didn't have money. This is like a pretty shiny, well put together machine. This is a gorgeous, like relatively bug free, just perfectly edited thing so far. There's no time for downtime. This isn't Resident Evil 2 where you have long stretches of silence and that's the tension that they're going for, right? The tension here is immediate, and it's this, it's the overwhelming sense of a city gone, like descending into chaos, zombies everywhere, explosions everywhere, helicopters crashing, Nemesis, an invulnerable threat, kind of on your ass. It's a sense of, just being overwhelmed. I think that, and this is, another topic we should kind of like touch on it, and one that I have strong feelings about is I don't think these games should be called remakes. I get why they are, because it's clever. R-E, haha. These are adaptations and interpretations. This is not Resident Evil 3, and we won't say how, is a pretty big departure from the original game. I haven't played it, but I know enough about it and have watched videos and such that you're not going to go everywhere you did in Resident Evil 3. And you're gonna maybe do some new stuff as well. And I'm kind of wondering, like, do you feel like that's a bad thing, that this game is not a literal like reinterpretation of the or recreation of the old thing, just 3D? Or do you like the creative liberties these folks are taking?
I like it for sure. I think even though I haven't played the original Resident
Mhm.
Evil 3, I like how this remake, if that's, yeah, I guess like there's what they're calling it, but I like the shape it's taken. Um, Obviously, I don't have that sort of nostalgia for the old one, and I
Yeah.
don't have anything to be upset about in terms of like, oh, they didn't include like this like mechanic, or they didn't include this area. But yeah, I enjoyed it as its own thing. And I think if I were to go and like watch some more gameplay of the original, it would probably just more, the remake would more complement it,
Mhm.
rather than it be like, let me get upset like, oh, they didn't do that right, or you know, like I do kind of like it, but I agree that I think it should kind of be its own thing, because it's not like a, the entire game remade to look amazing and pretty and new again. Um, I think maybe remake's not the best thing to call it. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I'd say I'm very happy with the finished product.
Yeah, and I don't mean we don't mean to like stomp all over Andy Kelly's review right now.
Yeah, exactly. Like, of course, I 100% understand where he's coming from, and he
Yes.
really does care about the original as well.
Yes.
Um, and I know a lot of people are going to be looking for that kind of opinion when looking at reviews. Because obviously, you're still going to have to buy this game if you want to play it. So it's like,
Mhm.
well, I need to know what I'm getting myself into here. And I think it's really good that Andy has that perspective and that it's out there.
Yeah. So like, what's the checklist here that people that will kind of send people one way or the other? Um, are you an Andy Kelly? Do you absolutely love the original game, and are you expecting this to be like a perfect kind of ode and recreation of that? Resident Evil 3 remake might not be for you. Do you love Mr. X and um, kind of what the original Nemesis did in Resident Evil 3, the original? Don't expect that, in maybe this game. This game might not be for you. Are you worried about length as like and I think I don't mean to tell people like their money versus time calculation isn't important, because that, people have different expectations, different amounts of free cash to spend on these things. So I don't think that's something we should underwrite by any means. But are you okay with a game that's shorter than Resident Evil 2? Resident Evil 2 remake doesn't have the split campaigns. Does have Resident Evil Resistance, a multiplayer mode. Maybe that's up your alley. Did you play that at all, Emma?
I haven't actually. I was
Okay.
waiting for it to release so that I could get some games. But yeah, I think you touched on something really important actually. The whole money versus time thing
Hmm.
is something that I'm definitely concerned about.
Yeah.
Usually when buying
$60.
games.
Yeah.
And yet this is worth saying, this is very short. So if that does come into like your calculations, then yeah, definitely read that review. And obviously you're listening to this as well. So
So you plan on going back this weekend and popping in for maybe another playthrough. Is there anything, Resident Evil games historically are short and incentivize multiple playthroughs with silly unlocks and weapons and maybe challenge runs. Is there anything there to like kind of incentivize extra playthroughs even more?
there's definitely weapons to unlock without me saying what it is, but
Okay.
people can probably guess anyway. Um, I think the main reason I really want to go back is because I played on the easiest difficulty to
Ah,
get through the game quickly for guides.
guides. The guides tax.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So the reason I want to go back is I want to play on a harder difficulty and see like how much scarier Nemesis is. In terms of finding stuff, I think I actually found most of the items there are to find. And because the map obviously it does it in Resident Evil 2 Remake as well, it just turns blue once you found stuff.
It's a
So
great
it's like,
map.
oh,
Great map.
you're done in that room. Cool. So that's always really helpful. But yeah, the main like draw for me going back is just to see the difference in difficulty and whether it's any sort of scarier. I want a little bit more tension.
Gotcha.
Playing on an easy difficulty definitely lowered that a lot.
It'll do that. Yeah, I will say,
Yeah.
like, I haven't been terrified. This is maybe something to clarify for curious people too. Is it again, kind of back to the point and what the kind of horror I like in Resident Evil games is closer to that Resident Evil 4 feeling. And I think Resident Evil 3 kind of is close, hews closer to that than like the classic Resident Evil 2. You know, you're lacking resources and you've got a couple zombies slowly ambling towards you. In Resident Evil 3, you still have zombies ambling towards you, but more often you have shitload of ammo. You have explosive barrels all over the place. There might be some, interesting configurations of more enemy types kind of coming at you. And sometimes, you might have Nemesis in the mix, just kind of ruining your day. So it's more breathless tension and action, that kind of like overwhelming sense of horror of being chased, than the slow plodding, like, oh God, do I have enough stuff to survive? Horror. And that works for me. If that doesn't work for you, then maybe RE3 isn't going to be your jam either. But any closing thoughts about Resident Evil 3? Emma, big takeaways, lessons learned.
I think the main thing I'll say about Resident Evil 3 is I didn't really know what to expect going into it other than what I'd seen in the demo. But the easiest way I can kind of sum it up is that if you really like Resident Evil 2 Remake and you want a little bit more of that, but nowhere near as long, very streamlined, but you're still kind of, you want to go back into that world and just do something a little bit different and play a little bit different, that is this remake.
Yeah, I agree. This is a good extension of that reimagined Resident Evil world. And yeah, it's a good time. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Anyway, if you need any more info to kind of steer you one way or the other, go read Andy's review, and take that, stack it up against what we've said today, and hopefully that steers you the right direction. If anything, the Resident Evil 2 Remake was on sale pretty quickly over the last year. You can get it for pretty cheap, I'm sure, in the future, and maybe you'll feel better about it then. If you can get it for like half the price, it's like an easy like no-brainer to me.
For sure. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Anyway, that's going to do it for us today. Emma, thank you so much for talking zombies and Nemesis and all that jazz with me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And, folks, you can always catch the PC Gamer Show Thursday, Friday, depending when I get it together. PCGamer.com/tag/podcast. Find it after the fact at youtube.com/PCGamer. Find us on Spotify, iTunes. Just search the PC Gamer Show. And if you do, and if you like it, leave us a click little stars. Give us some stars. Nemesis would, because that's what he says. Get it? That's what he says. Stars. Thanks, Emma. Thanks for that raucous laughter.
I'm sure everyone's laughing along right now.
Yeah. I'll just put a laugh track in there, or just crickets.
For sure.
Yeah, but gosh, I think this is kind of the big cliffside until, gosh, who knows what's coming up next, right? Are there any big releases in the near future?
The stuff I'm looking forward to is the Hearthstone expansion, Ashes of Outland, and Minecraft Dungeons as well.
Oh yeah, Minecraft Dungeons should be a good time. Yeah, it looks like fun.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to slow down a bit. Expect the segments in the show to change to more like maybe reflective or nostalgic segments. So Emma, if you have any ideas, let me know. And yeah, hopefully, this is like the big ocean between now and Cyberpunk, as far as I can tell. But we'll be scooping up some indie games and such between now and then too. But hope you're all doing all right, hanging in there during this interesting time, and hopefully our coverage and stuff is kind of maybe a bright moment in your boring day. But until next week, don't forget to what?
Game on.